Welcome back to a new episode of Animal Quests. Today, we're diving into the most gruesome shark attacks on humans in history. Let's get straight into the first story. The first story takes us to the stunning shores of Oahu, Hawaii, on a bright July afternoon in 2016. The sun bathed the island in a golden glow, and the crystal-clear waters of the Pacific beckoned to those in search of adventure. Among the visitors was Evelyn Thornton, a 48-year-old mother with a passion for travel and exploration. She was on vacation with her 17-year-old son, Caleb, seeking a mix of relaxation and excitement. The day was perfect for snorkeling, and Evelyn couldn't resist the allure of the vibrant coral reefs just offshore. The waters were about 30 feet deep, a mesmerizing blue that seemed to stretch endlessly. Caleb stepped into a kayak he had rented from a nearby shop, intent on keeping an eye on his mother while enjoying the water himself. Always protective, Caleb's attention shifted between the horizon and his mother as she prepared to slip beneath the surface. Evelyn swam into the water, immediately captivated by the beauty of the coral reef. She had a natural curiosity and an innocent wonder that sometimes left her less aware of potential dangers. The coral reefs were alive with color, angelfish darting through the crevices. As she swam deeper, Evelyn was entranced, fully immersed in the peaceful dance of marine life in the clear, quiet ocean. But as the minutes ticked by, Caleb began to feel an uneasy sensation creeping in. From his position in the kayak about 50 feet away from his mother, he noticed something unusual in the water. At first, he thought he might be imagining things, a fleeting shadow that could have easily been a trick of the light or a large fish. But as he squinted and focused, the shadow became more defined, and his pulse quickened with realization. It wasn't just his imagination. The unmistakable outline of a massive tiger shark emerged from the depths. This was no ordinary predator. It was a 12-foot behemoth, a creature of immense power, and it was heading straight for his mother. Panic surged through Caleb as he tried to warn Evelyn, but his voice was lost in the vastness of the ocean. He paddled frantically, but Evelyn, with her head submerged and focused on the coral, couldn't hear his desperate cries. A group of kayakers was further out, too far away to notice the threat, focused on their own activities. Then, in an instant, the peaceful underwater world erupted into chaos. The tiger shark struck with brutal force, its powerful jaws clamping down on Evelyn with terrifying speed. The shark's rear teeth sank into her shoulders, while its front jaw bit deep into her lower back and upper thigh. The water, once clear and inviting, was now a swirling mass of fear and pain. The impact threw Evelyn off balance, her body jerking violently as the shark pulled her under. The pain was searing, but there was no time to process it, only the instinct to survive. Then, just as suddenly as it had attacked, the shark released her, its massive form retreating into the depths. The ocean, moments ago a place of wonder, was now stained with blood, the water churning in the aftermath of the attack. Caleb's horror was absolute as he witnessed the unthinkable. But there was no time to despair, only to act. Fueled by pure instinct and a desperate need to save his mother, he paddled furiously toward her, his heart pounding with fear. His cries for help finally reached the ears of nearby kayakers, and one man, Mr. Daniels, was the first to respond. A seasoned local in his late 50s, Mr. Daniels moved with a calm urgency, his years on the water evident in his actions. Mr. Daniels reached Evelyn just moments before Caleb, quickly assessing the situation. The situation was just as critical as life and death itself, and they had to act fast. Deep slashes ran from her lower back up to her shoulders, blood pouring from the wounds. With practiced precision, Mr. Daniels pulled Evelyn onto his kayak, while Caleb, his fear momentarily giving way to determination, stayed close, anxiously scanning the water for any sign of the shark's return. The journey back to shore was intense, with Caleb and Mr. Daniels paddling as quickly as they could. As they raced toward the shore, people in the water began to notice something was wrong. Panic spread, with shouts of alarm echoing across the beach as swimmers quickly fled the water. Finally, they reached the shore. Caleb and Mr. Daniels laid Evelyn on the sand, pressing towels against her bleeding wounds. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived, and paramedics swiftly stabilized her and rushed her to Queens Medical Center in Honolulu. The beach, once bustling with activity, was now eerily quiet as lifeguards cleared everyone from the water. At the hospital, Evelyn was taken directly into surgery. The shark's bite had caused severe lacerations, requiring over 700 stitches. The surgery was lengthy but successful, and Evelyn was stabilized. When Caleb learned that his mother had survived, relief washed over him. Though he was uninjured, the trauma of witnessing the attack left him shaken. Medical staff quickly provided support, helping him process the ordeal. Grateful she had pulled through, Caleb knew they both faced a long road to recovery. In the year 2009, on the 27th of August, two seasoned fishermen, Desmond Kane and Oliver Reed, both in their early 30s, set out for a weekend fishing trip off the coast of Monterey Bay, California. For Desmond, it was a way to step away from the constant demands of his young family, his wife and two kids, allowing him to reconnect with his passion for the sea and the thrill of the catch. Oliver, too, relished these trips, finding solace in the ocean's vastness, a perfect antidote to the pressures of work and home life. These weekends were more than just fishing. They were a return to the simplicity and excitement of their younger days. The day began with high spirits as Desmond and Oliver loaded their gear onto their boat, laughing and bantering as they set off into the vast expanse of Monterey Bay. The morning sun glistened on the water's surface and the sea was calm, a perfect day for fishing. After a successful morning haul, the two friends decided to move to a different spot, hoping to increase their catch. As they cruised to a new location, Oliver noticed something unusual in the water, a sparkle that resembled the movement of a shark. He tried to get Desmond's attention, pointing toward the water, but Desmond, busy with the net, didn't see anything. He dismissed the concern, thinking it was nothing to worry about, and they both continued their tasks with laughter, brushing off the momentary concern. As Desmond lowered the second net into the water, he suddenly felt it become incredibly heavy. Just as he was about to call out to Oliver, a massive 10-foot mako shark leaped out of the water, biting down on Desmond's hand with tremendous force. The attack was swift and brutal. Blood poured from Desmond's mangled hand as he stumbled back, trying to process what had just happened. Oliver rushed to his side, searching frantically for the first aid kit, but it was nowhere to be found. They had forgotten it in their haste to set off that morning. Thinking quickly, Oliver tore a piece of fabric from a life jacket and fashioned a makeshift tourniquet, tying it tightly around Desmond's hand in an attempt to stop the bleeding. As they tried to catch their breath, the mako shark launched another attack, this time aiming for Desmond's leg. Oliver managed to pull Desmond away just in time, but the shark rammed the boat, causing it to lurch dangerously. The small vessel rocked violently and Desmond, already weakened from blood loss, nearly lost his balance. In a state of panic, Oliver scrambled to the boat's controls and started the engine accelerating away, but they had not yet reached full speed. The mako shark, known for its speed and agility, relentlessly pursued the boat, easily catching up as it hadn't yet reached top speed. With a sudden, fierce attack, the shark rammed into the side of the boat, causing a severe jolt that nearly tipped them over and left a deep dent, creating a small leak. Oliver, realizing the gravity of the situation, pushed the engine to its limits, finally managing to outpace the predator. After a tense and harrowing chase, the shark retreated into the depths, leaving the fishermen exhausted and desperate to reach shore before the leak worsened. Desmond and Oliver managed to return to shore just 20 minutes later, where they were quickly rushed to Marine General Hospital. Desmond's injuries were severe. His hand had suffered deep lacerations, and two of his fingers were partially severed. He underwent emergency surgery to repair the damage, including reattaching his fingers and treating the deep tissue injuries. In the aftermath, Desmond and Oliver were left puzzled by the intensity of the attack. An investigation later revealed that the shark responsible was an 800-pound mako, drawn by the scent of blood from their catch. Known for its incredible speed, this particular shark had likely been in a heightened state of aggression. The next story is truly horrifying. On April 20th, 1972, at Pismo Beach, California, a young boy was attacked by not one but 3 sharks on what began as a bright, sunny day. The beach was packed with families, all enjoying the warm weather and calm waters. It was a perfect day for a father and son outing. 10-year-old Stephen Harris was eager to try out his brand new snorkeling gear, and his father, Robert Harris, was looking forward to a relaxing day by the water. These beach trips had become their cherished bonding time, away from the stress of daily life. As Stephen eagerly waded into the water, Robert reminded him not to swim beyond 50 feet from the shore. After giving the reminder, Robert took a brief swim of his own before heading back to the shore to relax. Stephen, now around that distance out, found the spot perfect for snorkeling, with its calm waters teeming with marine life. The vibrant underwater world captivated him, and he had no desire to venture any further, content with the wonders just below the surface. Unbeknownst to the beachgoers, including Stephen and Robert, a group of teenage anglers further down the coast were fishing recklessly, using animal blood as bait. Their irresponsible actions attracted several sharks, bringing them dangerously close to the area where swimmers were enjoying the water. As Stephen floated in the water, his head occasionally bobbing above the surface, he suddenly spotted what appeared to be a dark shape cutting through the waves. With water droplets clinging to his snorkel mask, his vision blurred for a moment. He blinked, unsure if it was a shark's fin or just a trick of the light. Panic began to creep in, but before he could fully process what he had seen, a large shadow surged toward him, and a massive shark lunged, biting down on his left calf with devastating force. Stephen screamed in pain as the shark's teeth tore through his leg. In the confusion of thrashing water, another sharp pain ripped through his arm as he was bitten again, and then a third savage strike hit him across his lower back. The water around him turned red as the brutal attack unfolded, leaving him bloodied and surrounded by violence. From the shore, Robert Harris heard his son's screams and saw violence splashing in the distance. Panicked, Robert sprinted toward the ocean, but as he got closer, he realized his son was trapped in a deadly struggle, and he was powerless against the predator. The beach was thrown into chaos. Families and swimmers screamed in horror, rushing to safety. No one dared enter the water, fearing for their lives, except for Thomas Fletcher, a nearby surfer who witnessed the attack from a short distance away. With no hesitation, he paddled toward Stephen, determined to save the boy despite the clear danger. As Fletcher approached, he saw the shark circling Stephen, its dorsal fin slicing through the water. Risking his life, Fletcher used his surfboard to strike at the predator, fending it off just long enough to reach the severely injured boy. Despite the immense danger, Fletcher managed to pull Stephen onto his surfboard. Just as he did, he noticed more fins in the water. There wasn't just one shark, but 3 of them, circling and ready to strike again. The sharks stayed close as Fletcher paddled fiercely back toward the shore. Robert, now waist-deep in the water, rushed in to help pull the board with his son to safety. A lifeguard, already in the water, quickly joined them, helping to push the surfboard the final stretch. Once on the beach, other lifeguards immediately applied first aid to Stephen, who was bleeding heavily from deep wounds to his leg, arm, and back. He was barely conscious, and his survival seemed uncertain as blood loss rapidly took its toll. Stephen was rushed to French Hospital Medical Center in San Luis Obispo, where surgeons fought through the night to save him. He required over 1,000 stitches to close the gaping wounds, but miraculously, he survived. In the aftermath, an investigation revealed that the teenage anglers, irresponsibly using animal blood as bait, had attracted the sharks, 3 large sharks, which appeared to be bull sharks, to the area. This sparked widespread criticism of both the teenagers and beach safety officials for not having proper shark deterrents or warnings in place. Stephen would never forget the day he narrowly escaped death in the jaws of 3 sharks, and thanks to the bravery of the surfer, Thomas Fletcher, he survived. Laura Bennett, a 28-year-old from Boulder, Colorado, was on vacation in Cancun, Mexico, with her volleyball team. Besides being a nurse in her daily life, volleyball was her passion, and she spent much of her free time playing matches. She loved her team, and this vacation was meant to be a fun getaway to enjoy the sun, play volleyball, and strengthen the bond between teammates. On February 12, 2011, the second day of their retreat, they had a great day. Late in the afternoon, they finished a volleyball game on the beach. While everyone else left to return to the resort, Laura decided to stay behind for a quick swim while her friends headed back. The day was perfect, sunny, tropical, and carefree with no sign of danger. Unbeknownst to Laura, staff nearby had spotted 2 bull sharks that afternoon. They were on jet skis trying to search for the sharks and steer them away from the tourists. At the same time, they had just begun warning tourists on the beach to stay out of the water. But with many people spread out, it was difficult to notify everyone in time. They managed to divert one shark, but the other remained close to shore. Laura, unaware of the lurking threat, entered waist-deep water, about 3 feet deep, to wash off the sand from the volleyball game and cool off after hours of playing. As she rinsed off the sand absent-mindedly, she noticed people on jet skis waving at her and shouting in Spanish. They were too far away for her to understand what they were saying, and she mistook their gestures for friendly waves. Smiling, she waved back, feeling carefree and relaxed, unaware they were frantically trying to warn her of danger. Just as she continued splashing water on her legs, she suddenly felt something large and slimy brush hard against her left leg. Confused, she looked down and was horrified to see a bull shark clamp its powerful jaws around her thigh. At first, the shock numbed her and the pain didn't register immediately. But as the shark tightened its grip, a searing pain shot through her leg, triggering her survival instinct. She kicked and thrashed violently, trying to free herself. The shark suddenly released her leg, probably due to the trashing, giving her a moment for escape. Struggling to stay upright, Laura knew she had to get to shore. She fought against the pain and exhaustion, trying to push herself through the water. But just as she thought she was making headway, the predator returned with terrifying speed. This time, the shark struck from the side, its jaws latching onto her right arm. With whatever strength she had left, Laura used her left hand to strike at the shark's nose repeatedly, her blows becoming weaker with each strike. After several agonizing moments, the shark finally let go, retreating into the blood-stained waters for good. Now bleeding heavily and in shock, Laura struggled to stay on her feet, fighting to reach the shore. The staff on jet skis and those who had been warning people on shore immediately sprang into action as panic spread across the beach. The jet ski operators jumped into the shallow water, while the onshore lifeguards rushed toward Laura to help. The entire beach, now aware of the danger, watched in stunned silence as the rescue unfolded. Once on shore, Laura, despite the overwhelming pain and shock, assessed her situation with a nurse's instinct. With a shaky voice, she directed those around her on how to apply pressure to her wounds to slow the bleeding. Thanks to her quick instructions, she was able to prevent further blood loss until emergency services arrived. She was rushed to hospital in Cancun, where doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her. Laura had lost a significant amount of blood, around 30 to 40%, but the timely intervention of the jet ski operators and her own medical knowledge helped prevent even greater damage. After a long recovery process, including multiple surgeries, she managed to keep both limbs, though she faced significant challenges in regaining functionality due to the severity of her injuries. It was September 16, 2010, and the waters off Australia's west coast were unusually rough. A storm had recently passed, leaving the sea murky and unpredictable. Most divers had chosen to stay ashore that morning, but for John Riley, 35, and his friend Rick Lawson, 32, the conditions seemed challenging but manageable. The 2 men had been diving together for years, and despite the turbulent waters, they were eager to test their luck with another abalone dive. John, a seasoned diver and father of 4, had spent over a decade scouring these waters for abalone, prized for its culinary value. Each dive was a chance to escape the routine of life on land and immerse himself in the world below the waves. Rick, less experienced but trusting of John's instincts, felt the same thrill of adventure each time they ventured out together. With their boat anchored and gear ready, John was the first to enter the water. The mood between the two friends was light. They laughed and joked, feeling confident and ready for another adventure beneath the surface. John opted for hookah diving, a method that allowed him to breathe through a hose connected to the boat rather than lugging an oxygen tank. His wetsuit, weight belt, backup pony bottle, and knife were standard for dives like these, giving him both protection and mobility. Rick held the boat steady, watching as John slipped beneath the surface, the water closing over him with barely a ripple. Below, the world became thick and distorted, the recent storm turning the once clear waters into a swirling murk. From the boat, Rick watched as John's figure blurred and then disappeared entirely beneath the surface. In just moments, John was out of sight, swallowed by the most clouded conditions Rick could remember. John was accustomed to these conditions. Murky waters and obscured views were part of the job. He moved carefully, each motion measured as he navigated the underwater terrain. Somewhere below, among the rocks, lay the abalone he sought, hidden but valuable enough to make the dive worth the challenge. The lure of abalone and the $60 per kilogram it could fetch made the risk worth it. However, on this day, they were not alone in the water. The seals and sea lions that frequented the area were attracting a different kind of visitor, a great white shark. Minutes into the dive, as Rick kept a lookout from the boat, a dark shape broke the surface. A massive 19-foot great white shark, its tail thrashing the water. Rick's stomach dropped as he realized the danger. He screamed John's name, yanking on the hookah line in a desperate attempt to alert his friend below, but it was too late. The shark had already struck. The water exploded in a violent frenzy as the shark attacked. Rick's heart raced as he began pulling on the hookah line, but there was nothing. No resistance, no weight. Panic surged through him, the terrifying thought settling in that John was no longer attached to the line. He kept pulling frantically. The line suddenly gave way, and what came up from the depths froze Rick in place. John's harness, shredded and mangled, attached to the torn pony bottle, both bearing the unmistakable marks of the shark's teeth. Cold dread surged through Rick's body, but before he could process it, movement caught his eye. Just a few feet away, something floated to the surface, bobbing in the crimson-stained water. Rick's eyes locked onto it, his heart pounding with fear. John, his friend's lifeless body, mangled and broken, rose to the surface. Desperation surged through Rick as he leaned over the side of the boat, his hands trembling as he reached for John. He grasped at the blood-soaked wetsuit, but his fingers kept slipping, the fabric slick and wet. Rick tried again, but the current began to pull John away. With horror tightening his chest, Rick watched helplessly as John's body sank. Overcome with shock and devastation, Rick had no choice but to steer the boat back toward shore, hoping there was still something that could be done. When Rick reached Starvation Bay, he found a group of fishermen who helped alert the authorities. Search efforts were launched immediately, but the turbulent waters made the search difficult. 3 days later, John's body was recovered, confirming what Rick already feared. Marine experts believed the shark, likely confused by the murky water and the presence of seals, had mistaken John for prey. John Riley's death shocked the diving community. For Rick, the loss was devastating. He had trusted John's expertise, but the event was a stark reminder that nature is unpredictable and deadly. In the summer of 2004, 3 friends, Dylan, Mia, and Jake, all in their early 20s, set off on an exhilarating trip to South Africa. The trio, bonded by their love for adrenaline-pumping activities, had already conquered bungee jumping, skydiving, and surfing some of the wildest waves. But this time, they sought an even greater thrill: cage diving with great white sharks. On the morning of July 15, 2004, the 3 friends arrived at a small, locally operated diving center in Mossel Bay. The center, owned by a seasoned diver named Theo, offered cage diving experiences for those daring enough to come face-to-face with the ocean's most feared predators. Theo, a man with years of experience navigating these waters, welcomed them aboard his sturdy boat and provided a detailed briefing. He assured them that the cage was built to withstand any shark, putting their minds somewhat at ease. Dylan, the group's unofficial documentarian, was excited to use his new GoPro, a cutting-edge gadget at the time. determined to capture every second of the adventure. After gearing up in wetsuits, the trio was lowered into the water, securely inside the steel cage, which descended to a depth of about 15 feet below the surface. As they settled into the cage, they felt a new surge of adrenaline, thrilled that they had taken the plunge. The underwater world around them was teeming with colorful fish and stunning coral reefs. Mia, who had been a bit apprehensive at first, quickly became entranced by the beauty surrounding her. Dylan and Jake, equally captivated, couldn't believe their eyes as they watched the vibrant marine life pass by. Suddenly, a dark shadow loomed in the distance. Moving with incredible speed and power, it was a great white shark, nearly 16 feet long, and one of the ocean's most formidable predators. The shark began circling the cage, its curiosity piqued by the unusual presence. Dylan, eager to document the encounter, leaned slightly out of the cage to get a better shot with his GoPro. The shark made a sudden, lightning-fast charge at the cage, colliding with it so forcefully that the entire structure shook. In the commotion, Dylan's GoPro slipped from his grasp and began sinking toward the ocean floor. Without thinking, Dylan instinctively reached out through the bars to retrieve his camera. Just as he did, the great white shark made a second, more aggressive lunge toward the cage. Its powerful jaws snapped shut mere inches from Dylan's outstretched hand. Dylan managed to pull his arm back in time, but not without suffering a nasty gash from the shark's rough, sandpaper-like skin. Blood began to seep from Dylan's wound, drawing the shark's attention even more. Mia and Jake, now in full panic mode, screamed for help as the shark continued to ram the cage, trying to break through. Theo, realizing the severity of the situation, quickly started the process of lifting the cage out of the water. The crew on board worked frantically, hauling the trio to safety as the great white shark made one last, desperate attempt to breach the cage. As the cage was lifted out of the water, Dylan clutched his bleeding arm, while Mia and Jake held onto each other, shaken but grateful to be alive. The injury, though painful, was not life-threatening. Theo quickly applied first aid to Dylan's wound, wrapping it tightly to stem the bleeding. He then radioed for medical assistance as they headed back to shore. Once they reached the harbor, an ambulance was waiting to take Dylan to Mossel Bay Hospital, the nearest facility equipped to handle such injuries. Despite the terrifying encounter, all three friends survived. On the morning of May 14th, 2024, Simon Baccanello, a 46-year-old teacher from the small town of Elliston, South Australia, set out for a day of surfing at Walker's Rock Beach. The sky was clear, the waves that morning were steady, powerful, and just the right height, and the air buzzed with the excitement of the young surfers who joined him. Everything seemed perfect for a day on the water. Simon Baccanello wasn't just a teacher to the students of Elliston. He was a mentor, a friend, and a steady influence on their lives. As he watched the students paddle out, he was filled with a sense of pride and peace. He had seen many of them grow up, and now they were enjoying the sea that he had so often taught them to respect. The day began with optimism, a close-knit community sharing the simple joy of surfing under clear skies. But what followed was an unimaginable tragedy, transforming a peaceful morning into one of heartbreak. Around 10 a.m., as Simon and the group ventured further into the water, a nearby surfer who was packing his board into his car after a successful morning noticed something alarming: a large shark moving among the surfers. Alarmed by the dark shape cutting through the waves so close to the surfers, he began honking his car horn, trying to warn them. Simon, who was just about 50 feet into the water, saw the students had just begun catching waves. He heard the honking, initially confused, and scanned the horizon. Nothing seemed out of place at first, but the honking continued, and now people on the shore were waving frantically. Fully aware of the potential dangers, including sharks, he immediately started calling out to the students, urging them to return to shore swiftly but calmly. He knew he had to stay composed. Any sign of panic could make the situation even worse. While most of the students were nearing the shore, their feet finally touching the sand, Simon stayed behind in the deeper waters to ensure the last few made it safely. Just as the final student reached the beach, Simon, still in the water, felt a powerful blow from behind. It was the shark. Its jaws clamped down on his right leg. Desperate to break free, he twisted and struck the shark's nose, hoping to force it to release its grip. The enormous predator briefly let go, only to attack again, this time latching onto his left arm as he fell from his surfboard. Simon fought back, striking at the relentless creature, but a third and final attack pulled him under, the water turning red as he vanished beneath the surface. On shore, the students, having watched the entire attack in horror, began screaming, with some even attempting to run back into the water to help. Their panicked cries echoed across the beach, but distraught beachgoers rushed forward, holding them back from returning to the danger. Others frantically called for help, helpless as they witnessed the tragedy unfold. Eventually, volunteers and emergency responders arrived and initiated an extensive search. For hours, they scoured the waters and shoreline, but all that was found were fragments of Simon's surfboard and parts of his wetsuit, tragic remnants of a life cut short. Following the search, an investigation confirmed that Simon had been attacked by a great white shark. Bite marks on the recovered surfboard and witness accounts supported this conclusion. The beach was closed in the aftermath as authorities monitored the area for further shark activity and ensured the safety of the community. The next story is a horrifying one, especially because there is actual footage from this terrifying shark incident that happened on March 23, 1994. Heather Boswell, a 19-year-old crew member aboard the Discoverer, was about to face a nightmare she never could have imagined. Heather, working in the galley of the Discoverer, was spending 6 months at sea as part of a research mission in the Pacific Ocean. It was a demanding but exhilarating experience, a chance to witness the wonders of the ocean firsthand while contributing to important scientific work. The crew had grown close over the long days on the ship, sharing stories, laughs, and the occasional longing for the comforts of home. On this particular day, 300 miles east of Easter Island, the team was in high spirits. The sun was shining and the ocean stretched endlessly around them, shimmering under the afternoon light. After a busy morning of work, the crew decided to take a break. 9 members, including Heather, eagerly jumped into the open ocean for a refreshing swim, hoping to cool off and unwind. The mood was light. Laughter and chatter filled the air as the group enjoyed a rare moment of relaxation. 3 other crew members watched from a rigid inflatable boat nearby, their job to keep an eye on the swimmers for any signs of trouble, while another colleague maintained a lookout from the deck of the Discoverer. The ship's towering presence was a reassuring sight, standing as their safe haven in the vastness of the Pacific. Most of the swimmers had been in the ocean for over an hour, while Heather had been in for about 45 minutes. Unbeknownst to them, a massive 20-foot great white shark was lurking just below the surface. When someone first shouted, "Shark!" many thought it was a joke, but as the reality set in, panic spread quickly. The shark moved toward the group, and Heather, just 25 feet away from the predator, had no idea that her life was about to change in an instant. The inflatable boat immediately noticed the danger and began picking up the swimmers, but the shark was closing in fast. Heather, still in the water, tried to make her way to the boat, but before she could reach safety, the shark lunged, grabbing her by the ankle and pulling her underwater. A crew member on the inflatable boat desperately tried to fend off the predator with a broom handle, reaching out from the boat, but it was too late. The shark had clamped down on Heather's leg, shaking her violently. Heather fought her way to the surface, gasping for air, but the shark struck again, this time clamping down on her left leg with brutal force. As the predator thrashed, Heather heard a sickening pop, the sound of her leg snapping as the shark's powerful jaws crushed bone and tore through flesh. In that agonizing moment, Heather knew her leg was gone, and the shark's relentless grip had left her with catastrophic injuries before it finally released her. Heather managed to break free from the shark's grip, and the inflatable boat crew frantically pulled her aboard. As the crew pulled Heather to safety, they battled fiercely to fend off the great white. The shark eventually stopped thrashing as the small boat sped toward the Discoverer, navigating the turbulent waters in a race against time. Once they reached the main vessel, Heather was carefully pulled onto the deck. On board the Discoverer, the crew quickly realized the severity of Heather's injuries. Her left leg had been brutally severed during the attack, and she was losing blood rapidly. With no medical team on board, the crew sprang into action. They applied pressure to her wounds, used a belt as a tourniquet. Despite the limited medical supplies, the crew's swift response helped keep Heather alive long enough for emergency transport. She was first taken to a local clinic in Panama, where she received immediate attention. From there, she was transported to an army hospital in Panama, where doctors provided intensive care to manage her severe injuries, control infection, and stabilize her condition. Heather's recovery was a battle, but her strength and resilience shined through as she adapted to life after losing her leg. She later shared her story to educate others about the dangers of shark encounters, using her experience to raise awareness about the risks. The next story takes us to Sharm el-Sheikh, a renowned coastal paradise situated on the southern tip of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. This popular tourist hotspot is celebrated for its year-round sunny climate, clear blue waters, and vibrant coral reefs, attracting millions of visitors each year. However, Sharm el-Sheikh is also a site of frequent shark encounters. The region has seen several high-profile shark attacks over the years, making it one of the more dangerous spots along the Red Sea for such incidents. On December 5, 2010, 71-year-old Maria Bauer and her husband, Klaus, were staying at the luxurious Nilea Sands Resort. The German couple, married for over 40 years, were enjoying their 10th visit to the resort, having spent their later years discovering the world together. They were drawn back each year by the tranquility and beauty of the resort, which had become a cherished escape from the cold, harsh winters of Germany. However, they were unaware that the beach had been closed for a few days due to multiple shark attacks. Authorities had reopened it just 2 days prior, assuring guests that the waters were now safe and the beach was packed with tourists once again. As the couple made their way down the beach, Klaus decided to stop by the resort's beach bar, conveniently located just off the sandy path. He told Maria he'd be back shortly and grabbed an ice-cold drink, pausing for a quick chat with the familiar bartender they'd come to know over their many visits. Klaus took a moment to enjoy his drink, gazing at the bustling shoreline, not realizing these were his final peaceful moments. Meanwhile, Maria, eager to snorkel, continued toward the inviting, crystal-clear waters, blissfully unaware of the dangers lurking below. She marveled at the vibrant coral reefs and the colorful butterfly fish that darted around her, their bright patterns illuminating the water. Enjoying the tranquility, Maria didn't notice the sudden change in the fish's behavior as they darted away in a flash. Unseen beneath her, an oceanic white-tip shark was closing in. Known as one of the most dangerous shark species to humans, the oceanic white-tip is infamous for its ruthless hunting tactics. It stalks prey from below, striking with sudden, powerful bites and rarely letting go once it is latched on. Warmer water temperatures had drawn these predators closer to shore, bringing them into areas they rarely ventured, making encounters with swimmers even more perilous. This was exactly how it attacked Maria, striking from beneath with incredible speed. The shark lunged at her, biting into her leg with tremendous force and dragging her underwater before she had time to react or scream. Nearby tourists watched in shock as the attack unfolded. The poor elderly Maria stood no chance against the shark's relentless assault. She fought desperately, thrashing in the water, but the shark's powerful jaws clamped down repeatedly, refusing to release its grip. The white-tipped shark attacked again and again, dragging her violently through the water as she tried in vain to break free. Lifeguards rushed into the water, battling against the strong currents and chaos to reach her. They managed to pull her from the shark's grasp, but the damage had already been done. The extent of her injuries was horrifying. Flesh was missing from her buttocks, her abdomen was deeply lacerated, and her right arm and leg were partially severed. The lifeguards frantically tried to resuscitate Maria on the beach, working tirelessly as her blood soaked the sand. It was a horrifying sight, her pale, lifeless body contrasting starkly against the bright sun and azure waters. Despite their desperate efforts, Maria's injuries were too severe, and she succumbed to the brutal attack, dying on the shore as horrified onlookers watched in shock. When Klaus returned from the beach bar, he made his way back to see where Maria was snorkeling, unaware of what had happened in his absence. As he approached, he noticed a crowd gathered by the water's edge. Panic set in when he saw Maria's snorkel gear abandoned on the sand. Pushing through the onlookers, he froze at the sight of lifeguards desperately working on Maria's lifeless body. Klaus's heart shattered. Maria was gone. News of the attack spread quickly through the resort. Many tourists expressed their anger, feeling betrayed that they had not been properly warned about the recent shark activity. The hotel staff defended their decision, insisting that the authorities had assured them the waters were safe. Experts later identified the culprit as a nearly 10-foot oceanic white-tip shark. Investigations suggested that the sudden spike in attacks was due to unusually warm water temperatures and a reported ship dumping animal carcasses into the sea, which may have lured the sharks closer to shore. For Klaus, the tragedy marked the end of an era. Their years of exploring the world together had ended abruptly in the waters of Sharm el-Sheikh. It was June 10, 2024, and Tommy Johnson, a curious 10-year-old boy, was on vacation with his family at Coral Cove Marine Park, a popular ocean-themed adventure destination. Tommy had always been fascinated by the ocean, and this trip was all he could talk about for weeks. The highlight of the park was the famous Walk with the Giants experience, an underwater adventure that let visitors trek through a massive shark tank. The Walk with the Giants allowed guests to wear specially designed air helmets and walk along the bottom of a giant aquarium surrounded by sharks and other marine life. It was a chance to get up close with the ocean's most feared predators in their own environment, all while being safely guided by professionals. With wide-eyed excitement, Tommy convinced his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, to let him participate. His parents, always protective, hesitated at first but eventually gave in, confident that the park's reputation and safety protocols would keep their son safe. So Tommy's dream finally came true. As the heavy helmet designed to supply air was placed on his head, his parents watched nervously. The helmet allowed him to walk underwater in the shark tank, alongside a group of other participants. The moment Tommy descended into the tank, he was mesmerized. The enormous Caribbean reef sharks swam gracefully around them, their sleek, agile bodies moving through the water like shadows. Among the group, Tommy was the smallest, his eyes wide with wonder as he walked, carefully placing each step on the sandy tank floor. From above, Mrs. Johnson's view was crystal clear. She could see her son moving among the sharks. Mr. Johnson stood beside her, more relaxed but keeping a close eye on Tommy as well. At first, everything was magical. The sharks, known for their usually calm demeanor, glided by with little more than a glance at the visitors. But then, something changed. One of the sharks, a 6-foot-long Caribbean reef shark, suddenly turned toward Tommy. It was curious, perhaps confused by the boy's small stature and the unfamiliar movement of the helmet. The shark nudged Tommy gently at first, causing him to stumble in the sand. Tommy tried to regain his balance, but in that moment of confusion, the shark lashed out and bit his leg. Above, Mrs. Johnson's heart stopped as she saw a cloud of blood fill the water around her son. Her scream tore through the air, a desperate, gut-wrenching cry that echoed across the viewing deck. The crowd around her froze in shock, eyes wide in horror. Before anyone could react, Mr. Johnson leaped into action. Without a second thought, he jumped into the tank, disregarding the fact that he wasn't equipped with the necessary gear. Inside the tank, the shark, after its initial bite, quickly swam off, leaving Tommy alone. Mr. Johnson reached his son in seconds, his instincts overriding any fear. He grabbed Tommy and pulled him to the surface where the park staff were already mobilizing. They swiftly assisted in getting Tommy out of the water and applied immediate first aid. Tommy was rushed to the nearest hospital, his leg injured but treatable. The doctors worked swiftly, cleaning and stitching the wound. Despite the severity of the situation, Tommy remained brave throughout, and survived the attack. In the aftermath, an investigation into the incident was launched. Coral Cove Marine Park implemented enhanced safety measures to prevent such accidents from happening again, including stricter rules about the proximity of sharks to guests. However, the attraction did not close. In fact, the adrenaline rush of walking with sharks, even with the known risks, continued to draw thrill seekers from all over. The next story takes us to a warm and golden afternoon in mid-July 1958. Malibu Beach was bustling with life. The small coastal town in California drew locals and visitors alike, all eager to enjoy the sun and surf. Among the beachgoers were Noah Harrington, 19, and his best friend Liam Prescott, 20, along with a close-knit group of their high school friends. The young men had grown up together, sharing countless memories and always seeking the next adventure. After finishing a relaxed picnic on the sandy shore, the group decided to cool off in the inviting waters of Malibu Beach. It was around 3:30 p.m. when they waded into the ocean, laughter and playful shouts filling the air as they began to toss a beach ball between them. The day felt endless, and the joy of being together was palpable as they splashed around, enjoying the cool water on the hot summer day. The friends split into smaller groups, with several pairs engaging in their own games of catch. The sun sparkled on the water's surface, and for a time, everything seemed perfect. During their game, Liam, caught up in the fun, threw the ball with a bit too much force. It sailed over Noah's head and bounced further out, drifting into deeper water. Always eager to prove himself and never one to back down from a challenge, Noah immediately volunteered to retrieve it. Despite knowing Noah wasn't the strongest swimmer, Liam offered to go instead. But Noah, confident and determined, insisted on going after the ball himself. Noah swam beyond the shallow area where they had been playing, cutting through the water with strong, sure strokes. He soon found himself about 50 yards from shore, where the water grew deeper and the seafloor fell away into darkness. As he reached for the ball, a sudden and violent force pulled him under. The calm of the afternoon shattered in an instant, as the group saw the splash and realized something was terribly wrong. Liam's heart dropped as he saw Noah vanish beneath the waves. The carefree game was forgotten in an instant. Nearby, Cole Vickers, the vigilant lifeguard on duty, had been keeping a watchful eye on the group as they enjoyed the water. His attention was suddenly drawn to a disturbance among them, where playful shouts turned to alarm. Just beyond, he noticed the water churning violently, a clear sign that something was very wrong. Without hesitation, Cole grabbed his rescue buoy, blew his whistle to alert others, and sprinted toward the water. He dove in, swimming urgently toward the spot where Noah had gone under. Liam, driven by desperation and fear, followed as fast as he could, his heart pounding as he tried to keep up with the seasoned lifeguard. Noah resurfaced briefly, gasping for air, his eyes wide with terror. It was then that the true danger became clear. A large bull shark, a rare but deadly visitor to these waters, had attacked. The shark, driven by instinct, struck again, pulling Noah under for the final time. Despite the lifeguard and Liam's frantic efforts, they reached the scene only to find the water eerily empty, with no trace of their friend or the predator. Noah was gone, nowhere to be found, and no trace of the shark remained except for the blood in the water. Just minutes ago, he had been playing in the waves. Now, he was gone forever. In the days following the tragedy, search efforts were launched by local authorities and volunteers scouring the waters off Cape Haven for any sign of Noah. Despite their extensive efforts, Noah's body was never recovered. After 2 weeks of searching, on July 26th, the search was officially called off, and Cape Haven Beach was closed for several weeks. It was March 12th, 1958 on Uvongo Beach, South Africa, 80 miles southwest of Durban. After a stormy night, the clouds were beginning to break, and the sun was just starting to peek through, casting a golden glow over the murky, restless waters. Despite the earlier storm, beachgoers had begun to gather, drawn by the promise of clearing skies. Among them was Margaret Evans, a 28-year-old widow, hoping to find some solace by the sea with her 4 young children. They had just arrived, the children already absorbed in building sandcastles and chasing each other along the shore. As the beach grew livelier, Jeff Wolf, the owner of a nearby hotel, made his way through the crowd with an urgent warning. The previous night's storm had torn through the shark nets, leaving large predators free to venture dangerously close to shore. While some families heeded the warning and began packing up to leave, others lingered, reassured by the still shallow water. Margaret hesitated, watching the ebb and flow of the waves. She had only just arrived, and the children were so happy. As a few others waded cautiously into the water, only waist deep, she felt her initial worry subside. It seemed harmless enough. Convinced that the shallow waters posed little threat, Margaret waded in up to her knees, seeking a moment's reprieve from the warmth of the sun. The water, colder than she had expected, swirled murkily around her legs, the storm having stirred the sand and silt. Margaret waded in further, now waist deep, feeling a sense of safety as she stood among the other beachgoers. The sun was rising higher, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and chatter, calming her nerves. She glanced at her children playing in the sand and allowed herself to relax, reassured by the presence of others. Then, without warning, an older man nearby stumbled backward, splashing frantically. His movements were wild, his eyes locked on something in the water just beneath the surface. A 10-foot great white shark shot through the shallow water toward him. It breached violently, snapping its jaws dangerously close to his legs. Margaret's heart pounded as chaos erupted. The shark submerged briefly before reappearing right in front of her. Before she could react, its massive body slammed into her, knocking her off her feet. In an instant, its jaws clamped down on her torso, dragging her into the water. Panic erupted as beachgoers fled, the water churning with splashes and screams. Desperate attempts to drive the shark away filled the air, but it was already too late. The shark released Margaret, leaving her body to float in the blood-streaked water. The damage was catastrophic, and the sea around her turned crimson as she drifted motionless. Several men, including Jeff Wolf, rushed into the water to pull Margaret to shore. They dragged her through the waves, her body limp. As they laid her on the sand, it became immediately clear just how horrific the injuries were. Her left leg was nearly severed, and her torso had been torn apart by the shark's teeth. They tried desperately to stop the bleeding, pressing towels and shirts against her wounds, but it was no use. Margaret was unresponsive, her skin growing pale as she lost too much blood. Within minutes, she was gone. Margaret's 4 children, too young to fully understand, were surrounded by the chaotic aftermath. Authorities arrived, but the shark had vanished. In the days that followed, drumlines were set in hopes of capturing the shark responsible, but it was never found. On the afternoon of October 14, 1972, the sun hung low over the calm waters off Cane Bay, St. Croix. Known for its crystal-clear waters and dramatic underwater walls, Cane Bay was a diver's paradise, drawing both scientists and thrill-seekers from around the world. That day, the ocean was particularly serene, its surface gently rippling under the Caribbean sun. For 3 experienced divers, Brett Gilliam, Rod Temple, and Robbie McIlvaine, it seemed like the perfect day for their latest research expedition. The trio was on a scientific mission, exploring the famous Cane Bay Wall and documenting marine life. Equipped with full diving gear, including wetsuits, tanks, and harnesses, they descended into the deep blue. Brett and Robbie focused on collecting samples and taking notes, while Rod, the dive leader, stayed at a lower depth to finish some observations and monitor their overall progress. Their routine was practiced and precise. Each diver knew their role and limits. After about 30 minutes enjoying the dive, Brett and Robbie felt their work was nearly complete as they began wrapping up at around 175 feet. Everything had gone smoothly, but when they realized they hadn't heard or seen anything from Rod, positioned deeper, a sense of unease set in. Pausing their ascent, they waited for Rod to surface, but he still didn't appear. Robbie, scanning the water below, noticed bubbles rising from the depths, a clear sign something was wrong. While Robbie, running low on air, slowly ascended to the surface, Brett, with enough air in his tank, made the quick decision to dive back down, thinking Rod might be dealing with a minor gear issue. But what Brett found would turn their routine dive into a nightmare. When Brett reached Rod, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. A massive oceanic white-tip shark had clamped its powerful jaws around Rod's left thigh, its body circling just beneath him. The once clear water was now clouded with Rod's blood, turning the surrounding area into a murky red haze. Rod was barely able to fight back, his movements weak as he struggled to push the predator away. Acting on instinct, Brett approached cautiously, knowing the shark could easily turn on him at any moment. As he neared, the oceanic white-tip loosened its grip on Rod's leg, seemingly preparing for another strike. Seizing the opportunity, Brett lunged forward, grabbing hold of Rod's shoulder harness and pulling with all his strength, trying to drag him upward and away from the shark's deadly jaws. Rod, weakened and bleeding heavily, could barely help. Just as Brett started to pull Rod to safety, the shark surged again, striking with brutal force and knocking Brett off balance. Before Brett could regain control, another oceanic white-tip shark appeared from the depths, just as large and aggressive. It attacked Rod's leg, tearing away chunks of flesh with terrifying ease. Brett fought back fiercely, punching at the sharks in a desperate attempt to save his friend, but the predators were relentless, pulling Rod deeper into the ocean. Brett held on, refusing to abandon his friend, but the combined force of the sharks dragged them toward the edge of the underwater wall. As they descended past 300 feet, Brett, now running dangerously low on air, saw Rod's eyes meet his. Barely conscious, Rod gave Brett a final pained look, silently urging him to save himself. With no other choice, Brett knew he had to let go. As the sharks circled back for another attack, they ripped Rod from Brett's grip, dragging his mangled body into the abyss. Brett, now alone and nearly out of air, fought to stay conscious as he made his desperate ascent toward the surface. Every movement was a struggle, his vision fading as his oxygen-starved brain began to shut down. With his air supply almost depleted, Brett lost consciousness just before reaching the surface, his body floating upward, carried only by the small volume of air in his safety vest. Miraculously, Brett woke up gasping for air at the surface, dazed and disoriented. His survival was nothing short of a 1 in a million chance. Robbie, who had been anxiously watching from the boat, spotted him and rushed to pull Brett aboard. The relief of seeing his friend alive was quickly overshadowed by the grim reality that Rod was gone, lost to the depths. Without hesitation, Robbie steered the boat back to shore as fast as possible, trying to keep Brett conscious during the critical moments. Once they reached shore, an ambulance was already waiting, providing urgent care to stabilize Brett before transporting him to Schneider Regional Medical Center on St. Thomas. There, doctors treated him for severe exhaustion and the early stages of decompression sickness. Though he survived, Brett was left with lasting physical scars, numbness in his limbs, partial hearing loss, and damage to his vision that would never fully heal. Robbie and Brett attended Rod's memorial service a week later. Rod's body was never recovered, swallowed by the ocean's depths. The experience left both survivors marked by the ordeal, their lives forever changed by what began as a routine dive but turned into a nightmare. It was a bright sunny day on February 4th, 2023, in Perth, Australia. While many people flocked to the busy beaches, some sought out the quieter riverbanks for a more peaceful escape. Among them was 16-year-old Stella Berry, a vibrant and adventurous teenager who was always at the heart of the fun. Stella and her friends had chosen to spend the afternoon at the Swan River, a serene spot not far from her home in Perth, to cool off from the summer heat. Music played softly from a nearby speaker. Stella's friends were drawn to her lively energy, and she loved making every moment memorable. That day was no different, as the group enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and carefree afternoon by the river. As the afternoon unfolded, the group relaxed by the riverbank, chatting and enjoying the warmth after having taken a few refreshing swims earlier. After a while, Stella, with her deep love for animals, especially dolphins, spotted a pod gliding gracefully through the water, their fins slicing through the river's surface. The rare and captivating sight filled her with excitement, and she couldn't resist the urge to get closer. With a burst of energy, Stella stood up, stepping carefully over the smooth stones that dipped into the water. Her friends watched with curiosity and amusement as she made her way to the river's edge. Without hesitation, she jumped in, splashing into the cool water, determined to get a closer look at the dolphins. The river's gentle current began pulling her farther out, but Stella swam with excitement, her eyes fixed on the playful creatures in the distance. Her friends cheered her on from the shore, laughing as she splashed ahead, eager to reach the dolphins. Then, without warning, she felt a sharp, excruciating pain in her leg. Something had clamped down on her. At first, Stella was lightly panicked and started thrashing, trying to kick herself free from whatever was causing the pain. But the more she struggled, the worse it became. The creature gripping her leg wouldn't let go, and her thrashing seemed only to aggravate it. It was then that a bull shark appeared beneath her, its massive form shifting ominously in the water. Realizing the danger, Stella screamed for help. Some of her friends instinctively moved toward the water but stopped, knowing they couldn't get too close without putting themselves in harm's way. The shark tightened its grip, pulling her under for a moment before releasing its hold. The water around her turned red as Stella's leg was torn open. She surfaced, gasping for breath, and continued to fight her way back toward the shore. Nearby, a man who had been enjoying the afternoon heard the commotion and quickly jumped into the water. As Stella's friends stood helpless on the shore, too afraid to approach due to the danger, the man swam toward her with urgency. Fortunately, the shark had already started retreating, giving him the chance to reach her. He managed to pull Stella to shore, but by the time they reached the riverbank, she was already unconscious. It didn't look good for Stella, and despite the best efforts of those around her, the situation was becoming more desperate by the second. Paramedics arrived quickly, and they worked to stop the bleeding, applying pressure to the wounds and attempting to stabilize her. Despite their best efforts, the damage was too severe. Stella's injuries were fatal, and she passed away shortly after the paramedics arrived. The incident shocked the local community. Bull sharks are one of the few shark species that can thrive in both freshwater and saltwater, making rivers like the Swan River a part of their territory. Authorities issued warnings to the public, urging swimmers to stay out of the river while they searched for the shark. A day later, a 8.2-foot bull shark was captured about 0.6 miles from the attack site. With the help of local fishermen, the shark was caught and relocated far from the river. The community mourned Stella Berry, remembering her as a kind, fun-loving teenager with a bright future ahead of her. On the morning of August 12, 1993, David Miles and 4 close friends set out for a day of abalone diving along the northern coast of California. This was a familiar routine for the group. Every few weeks they would make the trip to these coastal waters, not only for the adventure and camaraderie, but also for the opportunity to gather abalone, a prized shellfish that could earn them extra money when sold to local markets. As they waded into the cool water, the sun cast a golden hue over the rugged coastline, adding to the sense of promise the day held. With their dive tube floating alongside them as a safety marker, the group swam out from the shore. Laughter and conversation filled the air as they prepared for the dive. They dove beneath the waters, and for about 30 minutes David and his friends explored beneath the surface, each heading in their own direction and occasionally surfacing for air. The clear water revealed patches of rocky terrain below, where they hoped to spot the distinctive shells of abalone. Moving effortlessly through the water, the group explored at their own pace. As the others ventured farther out, David decided to circle around a large rock formation that caught his eye. He carefully scanned the crevices for abalone, but after a few moments of searching, he realized there was nothing noteworthy. With a calm kick of his fins, he began to ascend toward the surface, ready to regroup. While ascending, David was captivated by the underwater scenery, distracted by the swaying kelp and the flicker of fish darting between rocks. His mind wandered as he took in the serene beauty around him, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Suddenly, without warning, he was violently struck from behind, jolting him out of his peaceful reverie. A massive great white shark, estimated to be 18 to 20 feet long, lunged at David. The shark swallowed him head first, its jaws closing around his head and shoulders. David could feel his head inside the shark's mouth and could even see light filtering through the shark's teeth. The shark bit down again, now grabbing him past his shoulder blades. David stayed motionless, fearing that if he struggled, the shark would thrash and tear him apart. In a stroke of luck, the shark opened its jaws briefly. David took his chance, pushing himself free from the shark's mouth. His adrenaline surged, and he frantically swam 30 yards to a nearby rock formation. He discarded his weight belt to swim faster, desperately trying to get out of the water before the shark attacked again. Luckily, he made it to the rock formation and climbed out of the water. He screamed for help, his voice carrying over the waves. Mike Swartzel, one of David's closest friends, surfaced for air after his dive and was the first to hear the desperate cries. Looking toward the rocks, he spotted David in clear distress. Without hesitation, Mike swam toward him, reaching the rocks where David had pulled himself out of the water. Within minutes, the whole group was gathered on the rock, fully aware of the gravity of the situation. One of David's friends brought the dive tube with him, knowing it would be crucial for their return. David's injuries were severe, and time was of the essence. The shark had bitten through his scalp, leaving multiple lacerations on his head and neck, and his back was laid open with deep wounds, as if by a fillet knife. They knew they had to get David back to shore quickly, but he was terrified to re-enter the water. After 30 agonizing minutes of convincing him, the friends decided to make the dangerous swim back, even though the shark was still active nearby. They jumped back into the water, using the dive tube for support as they made their way toward the shore. David, weakened by blood loss and slipping into shock, clung to the tube while Mike pulled him along, all the while painfully aware that the shark could return at any moment. As they swam, David became increasingly lethargic, and Mike feared his friend might lose consciousness before they could reach safety. Still, they pressed forward, determined to get David to shore. Fortunately, they were not attacked again, and they finally made it back to the beach. The beach was located beneath a large cliff, making access difficult. David had to be airlifted from the shore by a Coast Guard helicopter and transported to Mendocino Coast Hospital in Fort Bragg. His injuries were severe, requiring more than 100 stitches to close, but miraculously, he survived. Later, in an interview, David described his experience as akin to winning the lottery. And I think we can all agree, this truly was a life-or-death lottery that David was incredibly fortunate to win. It was mid-August 2004, off the coast of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, where three friends, all in their mid to late 20s, had come to unwind after months of intense fieldwork. Tristan Dawes, Owen Carter, and Eva Martinez had met during their marine research projects and quickly bonded over their shared passion for the ocean and their mutual love of fishing. Eager for some well-deserved relaxation, they rented a boat and set out early on the second day of their trip, armed with rods, reels, and a cooler stocked with cold beers. Their plan was simple: fish, laugh, and enjoy the peacefulness of the Atlantic waters. By mid-morning, they had anchored their boat a few miles offshore, in waters known for their rich marine life. The sun reflected off the gentle waves, and the atmosphere aboard the boat was light and carefree. As they cast their lines into the water, they chatted about their latest research, the joy of being out on the water, and the anticipation of a good catch. Not long after, Tristan felt a powerful tug on his line. His rod bent sharply, and the reel whirred as whatever he had hooked began to pull. Excitement filled the air as Tristan struggled to reel in what they all assumed was a large fish. But before anyone could fully comprehend what was happening, the surface of the water erupted, revealing the sleek, unmistakable form of a 17-foot great white shark. The friends stared in shock, their excitement turning to dread in an instant. The shark thrashed violently, pulling hard against the line. Tristan barely had time to react before the shark jerked with immense force, yanking him overboard and into the water. The ocean swallowed Tristan in an instant. Panic flashed in Owen and Eva's eyes as they watched their friend disappear beneath the surface. Moments later, Tristan resurfaced, but the nightmare had already begun. The shark, driven by its predatory instincts, had bitten down on Tristan's left leg, leaving a deep, gaping wound just below the knee. The pain was excruciating, but Tristan's fight was far from over. As he fought to get back to the boat, the shark struck again, this time clamping onto his right leg at the calf. The force of the bite fractured the bone and left another deep wound. Blood clouded the water around Tristan, and the situation grew dire. On the boat, Owen hesitated, uncertain whether jumping in would help, as Eva frantically looked around for boats and screamed, but saw no one. He tried to strike the shark with his fishing rod, but it was just out of reach. Owen knew that jumping in could be deadly, which made him hesitate on the boat, but he also knew he had to act. Then, for a brief moment, the shark paused its attack, circling slowly as if assessing the situation. Seeing his chance, Owen finally jumped into the water, seizing the only opportunity to save his friend. The shark was still present, but Owen's quick move caught it off guard. He grabbed Tristan under the arms, and together with Eva's help from the boat, they managed to haul him on board just as the shark began to circle again, this time more aggressively. Once on the boat, Owen and Eva quickly switched from friends to professionals. Their marine biology training, especially in emergency responses, took over. They applied pressure to the wounds, and Owen quickly tore off his shirt, fashioning it into a makeshift tourniquet. Tristan was conscious, but weak, slipping in and out of awareness as they worked to stabilize him. Eva grabbed the radio and contacted emergency services. With the shark still circling, Owen started the boat and sped back to shore. The usually tranquil ride back, which took about 10 minutes, was now a blur of adrenaline and focused action. Tristan's life hung in the balance, but Owen and Eva's quick thinking and well-honed skills kept him alive until they reached the dock. As they arrived at Jacksonville Beach, paramedics were already waiting, alerted by Eva's call. Tristan was quickly transferred to an ambulance and rushed to Jacksonville Memorial Hospital, where a team of surgeons was ready to perform emergency surgery. Hours later, after tense waiting, the news came that Tristan's condition had been stabilized. The surgery had been successful, but his road to recovery would be long. However, doctors were optimistic that with time, Tristan would regain full mobility. In the aftermath, the incident was hailed as one of the best-handled shark attack emergencies in recent history. Thanks to Owen and Eva's quick actions and calm under pressure, Tristan's life was saved. Simon Nellist was a devoted nature lover who found his true passion in the ocean after moving to Australia. Originally from Penzance in Cornwall, UK, Simon had served in the British Royal Air Force, where he completed 2 tours in Afghanistan, working as part of the military support team. After leaving the military, Simon moved to Australia, where the warm waters of Sydney captured his heart. He embraced the Australian lifestyle, living with his fiancée in a quiet coastal town and regularly enjoying the ocean. The couple's wedding plans were repeatedly postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and just weeks before their big day, their dreams were tragically cut short. Simon led a happy life, surrounded by the sea he loved and the woman he planned to marry. An avid swimmer, he used his daily swims to stay fit and prepare for events like the Malabar Magic Ocean Swim, which was set to take place the following weekend. On February 16, 2022, Simon put on his wetsuit and headed out for a routine training session. The day was perfect. The sea was calm and the sun shone brightly. New South Wales, where Simon swam regularly, employs a range of shark control measures, including nets, drones, and tagging programs to protect beachgoers from potential shark encounters. These efforts have been in place for nearly a century, focusing on relocating dangerous species like great whites, tiger sharks, and bull sharks away from popular swimming areas. Despite these precautions, sharks are still occasionally spotted near the shore. Simon, however, was a strong critic of these control measures. He believed that shark nets and drum lines did more harm than good, endangering marine life without truly protecting people. To him, the ocean was the natural habitat of its creatures, and humans needed to respect that balance. He often shared his views online, passionately arguing that these methods disrupted the delicate ecosystem of the sea and failed to address the real issue. For Simon, the sea was a place of freedom and beauty, not something to be controlled or feared. Simon experienced this sense of freedom and beauty profoundly as he entered the waters for his usual training route near Little Bay, a tranquil spot just south of Malabar Beach. The water was calm, and the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the sea. Fishermen stood on the rocks nearby, casting their lines, and others were swimming or paddling in the water, enjoying the peaceful surroundings. As Simon swam steadily through the water, unaware of the danger lurking below, a massive great white moved silently in the depths beneath him. At around 4:30 p.m., less than 500 feet from the shore, the great white shark made its move. The shark, over 10 feet long, burst out of the water with Simon clamped in its mouth, lifting him into the air with a force so powerful that it resembled a car smashing into the ocean, creating a colossal splash. Simon, his screams shattered the air, echoing off the cliffs and reaching the horrified onlookers gathered on the rocks at Bucking Point. The fishermen and swimmers, frozen in shock, could do nothing but watch, powerless to intervene in the violent scene unfolding before their eyes. The predator twisted and shook, tearing Simon in two with a horrifying force that sent blood and foam churning into the water. The shark continued its assault, ripping apart Simon's body as though it were nothing, its powerful jaws snapping shut again as it swallowed parts of his remains before finally diving back into the depths. Simon Nellist, aged 35, tragically lost his life in the attack, marking a devastating end to a life spent embracing the ocean he loved. Immediately after the terrifying attack on Simon, the Coast Guard and lifeguards patrolled the area in boats and on jet skis, desperately trying to find the shark responsible. Smart drum lines were deployed into the location, but the shark was never found. His fiancée, who had been eagerly planning their wedding just weeks away, was devastated and chose not to speak to the media, overwhelmed by the sudden and tragic loss. Locals who knew Simon and often greeted him during his daily swims said that it was unusual for swimmers in the area to wear wetsuits. The water was warm, and most bathers did not wear them. Experts have suggested that Simon, in his black wetsuit, was mistaken for a seal from below. In the wake of the attack, Little Bay Beach was closed to the public, a somber response to the tragedy that unfolded on its shores. Shark attacks are sometimes obvious from people who don't think clearly, but the next story is just sad and shows the unexpected dangers from the sea. It was June 14, 2022, a bright summer day, perfect for exploring the underwater world off the coast of North Carolina. The Outer Banks were alive with the colors of marine life, an inviting paradise for anyone seeking adventure. Among the excited group of students was Ethan Davis, a 16-year-old eager to immerse himself in the wonders of the ocean. The school trip had been the highlight of the year, a chance to learn and experience the marine ecosystem firsthand. The students had gathered early in the morning, their excitement palpable as they boarded the boat that would take them to their diving site. The vessel was equipped with all the necessary gear for a safe and enjoyable dive. Mr. Roberts, an experienced dive instructor and former Coast Guard medic, led the briefing session. His presence instilled a sense of security among the students, who trusted his expertise implicitly. Mr. Roberts began by explaining the basics of scuba diving, covering essential safety protocols and demonstrating how to use the diving equipment. He emphasized the importance of the buddy system, urging everyone to stay close to their assigned partners. Ethan and his best friend Michael were paired together, their shared enthusiasm adding to the anticipation. As the boat cut through the gentle waves, Mr. Roberts pointed out various landmarks and shared interesting facts about the local marine life. The group arrived at the designated diving site. With a final check, Mr. Roberts gave the signal, and one by one, the students entered the water. The initial moments underwater were nothing short of magical. Ethan couldn't believe his eyes. as he swam among the vibrant marine life. He and Michael swam side by side, pointing out various marine creatures and sharing moments of awe. But as they ventured deeper, the water grew colder, and the visibility decreased slightly. Ethan noticed a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle tension that was hard to pinpoint. The group continued, unaware of the lurking danger. Suddenly, without any warning, a sharp, excruciating force tore through Ethan's arm. The world around him descended into chaos in an instant. A large bull shark had latched onto him, its powerful jaws clamped down with terrifying force. The water around him rapidly turned a dark, murky red as his muffled scream echoed through the dive mask. The scene was a whirlwind of violence and fear. As the shark thrashed, dragging Ethan further into the depths, the raw power of the creature was evident. Panic erupted among the students. Michael, who was closest to Ethan, was frozen in shock, his eyes wide with terror. He couldn't move, couldn't think. Mr. Roberts sprang into action, his training kicking in. With swift, decisive movements, he drew his dive knife and swam towards the shark, slashing at it to drive it away. The shark released Ethan, but the damage was done. Blood poured from Ethan's arm, the water swirling in a ghastly dance. Mr. Roberts quickly applied a makeshift tourniquet, using a piece of equipment to slow the bleeding. His hands moved with practiced precision, but his eyes betrayed the fear he felt for Ethan's life. The scene above water was equally chaotic. The other instructors hurried to evacuate the panicking students to safety. The commotion caught the attention of nearby boats, and a radio call was made for immediate medical assistance. With the help of other students and instructors, Mr. Roberts dragged Ethan back to the boat. Each second felt like an eternity, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on everyone involved. Michael, now recovered from the initial shock, followed closely and helped bring Ethan safely to the surface. Once on the boat, Mr. Roberts and the crew worked to stabilize Ethan. They wrapped his arm tightly and did everything possible to manage the bleeding. The boat sped toward the shore, the engine roaring as it cut through the waves. The distant sound of a helicopter grew louder, signaling the arrival of medical help. As they reached the shore, paramedics rushed to Ethan. They worked quickly, stabilizing him as best they could before loading him into the helicopter. The uncertainty of Ethan's survival hung heavy in the air. After a while, word came through. Ethan had survived. His injuries were serious, including multiple fractures and nerve damage, but with time and rehabilitation, doctors expected him to recover. The news reached the students, bringing relief as they learned that Ethan was alive and had a chance to heal, though his road to recovery would be long. The morning of September 9th, 2014, unfolded like many others in Byron Bay. The sun rose gently over the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the calm waters of the Pacific. Byron Bay, renowned for its long stretches of pristine beaches and laid-back lifestyle, was stirring to life once again. Yet, beneath its tranquil surface, the waters off Byron Bay held a more dangerous side. Home to a variety of marine life, including great whites, bull sharks, and tiger sharks. It was a place where the risks, though rare, could become reality. The last fatal shark attack in the area had occurred in 1993, a distant memory for most. But that morning was about to change everything. Paul Wilcox was one of many who found solace in Byron Bay's beauty. A 50-year-old British expat, he had been drawn to the area a decade earlier, embracing its easygoing lifestyle. Each morning, he followed a familiar routine, heading to the beach to enjoy a peaceful swim in the bay's cool waters. Paul's wife, Victoria, walked alongside him. They had developed a pattern of fitness together. She would jog along the shore while he swam, each returning to the same spot afterward. The ocean, familiar and calm, was where Paul felt most at peace. Little did he know, today would be the last time he'd enter those waters. After sharing a goodbye kiss at their usual spot by the shoreline, Paul and his wife parted ways, agreeing to meet for a drink at their favorite cafe after their swim and run. It was part of their cherished routine, something they both looked forward to each morning. As Victoria jogged along the sandy beach, Paul waded confidently into the water. The cool ocean washed over his feet as he moved further out. The beach was lively but not overly crowded. Paul swam out about 50 feet from the shore, the water calm and familiar. After about 20 minutes of swimming, Paul felt a sense of satisfaction. His usual routine was nearly complete, and it was time to turn back. He knew Victoria's run would soon be ending. He turned and began swimming along the length of the beach, his body moving smoothly through the water. But beneath him, a silent predator was closing in. A 7-foot great white shark, drawn by the ocean currents, had been swimming parallel to the shore. Its dark shadow moved unnoticed through the water, its eyes fixed on the shapes above. As Paul adjusted his course, the shark too shifted its path, aligning perfectly with his movement. Then, without warning, the shark struck. A violent tug yanked Paul's leg, sharp and jarring. His body jolted as the shark's powerful jaws clamped down, its serrated teeth cutting through muscle and tissue with deadly precision. Blood poured into the water, turning the blue waves into a dark, swirling red. Paul struggled to stay above the surface, but the shark's grip was unyielding. On the shore, people began to notice the disturbance. One man, 52-year-old Mark Hickey, was walking along the beach when he saw the commotion in the water. From a distance, it looked like a dark shape, a tangle of seaweed or maybe a turtle. But as he squinted through the glare of the sun, the horrifying truth became clear. It wasn't seaweed, and it wasn't a turtle. It was a man, and circling him was a shark. Without thinking, Mark sprinted toward the water. As he dived into the ocean, he could see the blood clouding the water. The shark had released Paul momentarily, but the damage was already done. Paul, barely conscious, was drifting. Mark swam as fast as he could, grabbing Paul and pulling him toward the shore. The predator circled again, drawn by the scent of blood, but Mark didn't stop. He fought against the current and the overwhelming terror that the shark might strike again. Onlookers screamed for help. The beach, once peaceful, had turned into a scene of panic. Lifeguards raced to the water, but by the time they reached Mark and Paul, it was too late. Paul's body was limp, his face pale. Mark dragged him onto the sand, performing CPR desperately as paramedics arrived, but there was nothing anyone could do. Paul Wilcox was pronounced dead on the scene, the injuries too severe, the blood loss too great. As the news spread, the beach emptied, the once bustling shore now a quiet, haunted place. Helicopters and lifeguards searched for the shark, which had vanished back into the deep, its massive body still visible below the surface as it moved away. Victoria, still jogging when the attack happened, arrived to a horrific sight. A crowd gathered around a motionless figure on the sand, paramedics working frantically. Her heart sank as she realized the figure was her husband. The nightmare was real. The peaceful routine that had defined their mornings was shattered forever. The great white shark that had claimed Paul's life was never caught. Despite sightings and the search efforts, it returned to the ocean, leaving behind only grief and fear in a place that had once been a sanctuary. Byron Bay would never feel the same again. In the summer of 1931, on the evening of August 30th, deep within the tranquil shores of Barbers Point, Hawaii, two siblings embarked on a swim that would take a horrific turn, altering their lives forever. Lani Kiloha, 25, was a vibrant young woman known throughout her village for her adventurous spirit and deep love for the ocean. She had grown up with the sea as her playground, finding both joy and solace in its endless waves. Her younger brother, Koa, 18, was the more cautious of the two, always watching out for his sister. Though he shared Lani's love for the ocean, Koa approached it with a respect that bordered on wariness, ever mindful of the dangers that lay beneath its serene surface. That evening, after a particularly long and exhausting day of work, Lani felt an irresistible pull toward the water. Their usual swim around sunset, typically around 6 p.m., had been delayed, and they arrived a few hours later. Despite the late hour, the siblings decided to proceed with their swim, eager to wash away the day's stress in the cool embrace of the ocean. They waded into the water, feeling the familiar chill invigorate them after the hot day. Koa stayed closer to shore, while Lani ventured out nearly 50 feet, where the water deepened and the vibrant sea life below caught her attention. Koa kept an eye on his sister from a distance, noting her position in the deeper waters. As he felt himself cooling down and the sky began to darken, he was about to call out to Lani, suggesting they head back to the beach, when he noticed something. A massive fin slicing through the water, moving swiftly toward her. In an instant, the tranquility of the evening was shattered. An 18-foot great white shark erupted from the water, its massive jaws clamping down on Lani. The force of the attack dragged her under, the water around her turning red as Koa watched in horror, too far away to reach her in time. The last thing he saw was Lani's hand, briefly breaking the surface, before she was pulled into the depths. Koa froze, his mind struggling to grasp the nightmare unfolding before him. Desperation surged through him, and he began swimming frantically towards where Lani had disappeared. But he knew it was too late. It was only the roar of an approaching boat that snapped him out of his shock. Kaipo Maho, an elderly fisherman who had been watching from a distance, was racing towards them. Kaipo steered his boat rapidly towards Koa, pulling him aboard as the younger man stammered out what had happened. Kaipo, understanding the severity of the situation from Koa's shock and the blood in the water, quickly scanned the area, but Lani was nowhere to be seen. The water was darkening fast, making the search increasingly difficult. Realizing time was of the essence, Kaipo immediately radioed for emergency assistance, knowing they had to begin the search for Lani, though he feared the worst. Hours after the attack, a coordinated search effort was underway. Several boats navigated through the sea as local residents rushed to help, with news of the situation spreading rapidly. Just after midnight, one of the search teams spotted a large shark near the area where Lani was last seen. The shark, an 18-foot great white, was captured and brought aboard a rescue vessel. The shark, weighing 1,750 pounds, was a formidable and terrifying sight. Upon examination, the grim reality was confirmed. Inside the shark's stomach, they found bone fragments and pieces of Lani's bathing suit, leaving no doubt about her fate. Koa, devastated and in shock, struggled to stay composed as the enormity of what had happened sank in. The community mourned the loss of Lani, with the story making headlines as one of the worst shark attacks in Hawaii's history. On June 17, 2001, the serene island of Bora Bora, known for its turquoise waters and breathtaking sunsets, became the backdrop for an unimaginable tragedy. What began as a day of love and celebration for Ethan and Olivia Rivers would end in horror, a day that no one present would ever forget. Ethan Rivers, 30, was a man of quiet strength, deeply devoted to his new wife, Olivia, a 27-year-old with an adventurous spirit. Their relationship, nurtured through years of friendship and shared dreams, had captivated everyone around them. Their wedding day was a flawless celebration. The couple exchanged vows in an afternoon ceremony framed by the stunning backdrop of Bora Bora's turquoise waters. The joy of the moment was shared with their closest friends and family, and as the sun began to set, the formalities of the day gave way to an evening of festivities. The air was filled with the gentle sound of waves and the soft glow of tiki torches casting flickering light on the sand. In the afterglow of the ceremony, Olivia, still buzzing with excitement, suggested to her bridesmaids and a few close friends that they take a swim. The idea, perfectly aligned with her adventurous spirit, was met with enthusiastic agreement. Ethan, ever cautious, felt a flicker of concern. He knew that dusk was a time when the ocean's predators were more active, but Olivia's infectious confidence reassured him. With the light still lingering and the shore just a short distance away, he kept a watchful eye as they entered the water, hoping for a memorable end to their perfect day. Laughing and carefree, the group dashed toward the water, splashing as they waded into the warm, shallow sea about 30 feet from the shore. The water was cool against their skin, a welcome relief after the heat of the day. They splashed playfully, the laughter echoing across the beach, unaware of the danger that lurked just beneath the surface. As Olivia floated on her back, gazing up at the sky with the sun still casting its warm glow, a gentle breeze brushed against her face. The ocean's rhythmic lapping against her skin was almost hypnotic. lulling her into a deeper state of relaxation. But then, something brushed against her leg, a fleeting moment of unease that she quickly dismissed in the fun of the moment. Before she could fully react, a powerful force latched onto her right calf, sending a searing pain through her body. In an instant, the serene scene turned to chaos. Olivia felt the first bite, a sudden excruciating pain as a bull shark's massive jaws clamped down on her right calf, tearing through muscle and skin. She barely had time to scream before the shark struck again, this time sinking its teeth deep into her upper thigh, shredding through muscle and bone with terrifying ease. The water around her turned dark as blood poured from the wounds. Her friends, horrified, sprang into action. One of them, driven by sheer terror, jabbed at the shark's gills, a known weak spot. The tactic worked and the bull shark released its grip, retreating into the depths of the ocean, but the damage was already done. The water around Olivia was a deep, menacing red, her leg a mangled mess. Desperately, her friends began pulling her toward the shore. On the shore, Ethan had been keeping a watchful eye on Olivia and her friends, the music from the party blaring loudly behind him. But when the playful splashing stopped and was replaced by frantic, erratic movements, he knew something was terribly wrong. He strained to see through the dimming light, and then he saw it, Olivia's body jerking violently in the water, surrounded by panicked friends. His heart dropped. Without thinking, Ethan sprinted toward the shoreline. The party fell silent as guests noticed his desperate run. The music abruptly cut off as everyone turned to see what had caused such a panic. Ethan reached the edge of the water just as Olivia's friends were frantically pulling her back to shore. Blood streamed from the horrific wounds, staining the once clear water. The resort's medics, alerted by the rising panic, rushed to the scene. Despite their best efforts to stop the bleeding, Olivia succumbed to her injuries on the beach. The fatal wounds included a severe laceration to her femoral artery, leading to catastrophic blood loss. In the aftermath, local authorities and marine experts conducted an investigation, estimating the shark to be a bull shark nearly 10 feet long, known for its aggressive nature and ability to thrive in shallow waters. The beach was immediately closed, and warnings were issued to residents and tourists alike. The tragedy not only shocked the community, but also left Ethan with an unbearable weight of guilt, as he realized he would have to carry the burden of her loss for the rest of his life. On July 15, 2018, Praia do Paiva in Brazil was buzzing with the energy of over 1,000 beachgoers enjoying the scorching afternoon. Known for its golden sands and clear, inviting waters, Praia do Paiva was packed with people looking to make the most of the sun and sea, creating a lively and bustling atmosphere typical of a busy beach day. However, beneath the serene surface, hidden dangers were present. Bull sharks, notorious for their aggression, frequently patrolled the shallows during nesting season, drawn by the warm waters and abundant prey. With shark activity at its peak, lifeguards were on high alert, carefully scanning the packed waters and constantly monitoring the throngs of beachgoers. Felipe Alves and Carlos Lima, both 24, were among those enjoying the day. Friends since childhood, they were part of a larger gathering that filled the beach with laughter, drinks, and conversation. Coolers packed with cold drinks and snacks kept the party going, and as the day wore on, the scorching sun began to drive many families away, leaving behind groups of adults determined to make the most of their carefree afternoon. After quite a few drinks, Felipe and Carlos decided to break away from the main group, seeking the calming waters for a much-needed breather. As they walked to the shore, they continued their light-hearted conversation about the latest football matches, laughing and enjoying each other's company. Without much thought, they waded waist-deep into the cool water, savoring the quiet. As they chatted, they discreetly relieved themselves in the waves, a common habit among locals, especially when restrooms were out of reach. The lifeguard on duty, Mateus, kept a watchful eye from his tower, noticing Felipe and Carlos wading into the water. To him, it appeared routine. Two friends cooling off, just like many others on the beach that day. The water was murky, stirred up by the constant movement of swimmers. Unbeknownst to everyone, including Mateus, An 11-foot bull shark had been prowling the shallow waters for hours, likely drawn in by the scent of beachgoers and the presence of bodily fluids, including urine in the water. This bull shark, a fierce and opportunistic hunter, was driven closer to shore by hunger. Having recently given birth, her usual prey had become scarce, and the activity near the beach presented an irresistible opportunity. Felipe and Carlos, lost in conversation, were unaware that they had entered the shark's territory, their movements attracting the predator's attention. Suddenly, the shark struck with lightning speed, launching herself at Felipe and sinking her powerful jaws into his thigh. The force of the impact knocked Felipe off balance, sending him sprawling into the water as Carlos, stunned by the sudden attack, struggled to stay on his feet. Felipe's head went under for a moment before he surfaced, gasping for air. His leg throbbed with searing pain, and as he tried to steady himself, he saw the water around him turning red. Panic set in as he realized the shark's bite had severed a major artery. Carlos, now fully aware of the danger, grabbed Felipe's arm and began to pull him toward the shore. But the shark wasn't done. With a quick and savage twist, she circled back and clamped down on Felipe's right hand, ripping it away with her powerful razor-sharp teeth. After this final bite, the shark abruptly turned and swam off, vanishing into deeper waters. Carlos immediately grabbed Felipe, struggling against the waves and Felipe's limp weight, as he dragged his injured friend through the blood-streaked water. The off-duty lifeguard, Mateus, immediately sprinted towards the chaotic scene, where Felipe lay severely injured. The horrifying sight unfolded before him. Felipe's hand was gone, his leg brutally severed, and he was slipping in and out of consciousness. Mateus began performing CPR with urgency, desperately trying to keep him alive as a crowd of stunned beachgoers surrounded the scene, their phones and cameras capturing every moment. Despite Mateus's frantic efforts and the help of others, the catastrophic blood loss was too much. Felipe was pronounced dead before the ambulance could arrive. The attack left the community in shock. Just moments ago, Felipe was enjoying a carefree day with friends, and now, his life had been brutally cut short, bleeding to death on the same beach where he had been laughing and celebrating. In the days following the attack, authorities increased shark patrols and implemented a no-alcohol policy to enhance safety, urging beachgoers to stay vigilant against the lurking threats. Reports confirmed sightings of the same bull shark, estimated to be about 11 feet long, further unsettling locals who were now grappling with the tragedy. This attack is yet another reminder that the ocean is the territory of its creatures, like sharks, and that entering the waters is always at our own risk. The next story takes us to the sunny beaches of the Maldives, a place where crystal-clear waters meet breathtaking sunsets. In the summer of 2020, three best friends, Emma, Olivia, and Sophia, embarked on a dream vacation, seeking relaxation and adventure. The serene beauty of the Maldives promised them an unforgettable experience, but what awaited them was a nightmare they could never have imagined. Emma, Olivia, and Sophia had been planning this trip for months. They were inseparable, their bond strengthened by years of shared experiences and adventures. During the trip from the airport to the resort, the friends chatted excitedly with their driver, who mentioned a recent shark attack that had occurred a few weeks ago. A tourist had barely survived after a harrowing encounter with a shark. As the driver recounted the story, Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. She had always had a deep-seated fear of sharks, a fear that was now bubbling to the surface. Sophia suggested they should be careful, noting that the attack wasn't that long ago. Despite her concern, Emma, always the adventurous spirit, waved off Sophia's worries. Emma believed the chances of another shark attack happening so soon were extremely slim. Olivia, ever the peacemaker, reassured Sophia that they would stick together and stay close to the shore, emphasizing the clarity of the water, which would allow them to see anything approaching from a distance. Despite her friend's reassurances, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As the sun began to set, they decided it was the perfect time for their first snorkeling adventure. Emma and Olivia's excitement was infectious, and Sophia reluctantly followed them into the sea. The underwater world was mesmerizing. Colorful fish darted around them, and the coral reefs glowed in the fading light. They swam further out, entranced by the beauty surrounding them. Laughter filled the air as they pointed out different sea creatures to each other, their hearts light and carefree. Suddenly, the tranquil scene turned into chaos. Sophia felt a sharp tug on her leg, and a moment later she was pulled underwater. She struggled to surface, her eyes wide with terror. Emma and Olivia heard her muffled scream and turned to see the water around her turning red. Panic set in as they realized what was happening. A shark was attacking their friend. Without a second thought, Emma and Olivia swam towards Sophia, desperate to save her. They grabbed her arms, trying to pull her away from the shark's grip. The shark, a massive shadow beneath the water, thrashed violently, refusing to let go. Sophia's screams were heart-wrenching, filled with agony and fear. The shark's powerful jaws clamped down on Sophia's leg again, and Emma and Olivia could see the desperation in her eyes. They fought with all their strength, kicking and hitting the shark, but it was relentless. The few people on the beach noticed the commotion and began shouting for help, their voices filled with urgency. The minutes felt like hours. Emma and Olivia's attempts to save Sophia were in vain. The shark was too strong, and their friend's strength was waning. Sophia's grip on their hands weakened, and with a final blood-curdling scream, she was pulled under the water, disappearing into the depths. Emma and Olivia were left floating in the blood-streaked water, their hearts pounding with terror and grief. They clung to each other, their bodies shaking with sobs. It was then that they realized the extent of their own injuries. Emma's leg had been severely bitten, with deep puncture wounds and torn flesh, causing significant blood loss. Olivia had deep gashes on her arms and back from the shark's thrashing, and her leg was also severely lacerated, bleeding profusely. On the beach, a few remaining tourists had witnessed the horrific scene and immediately called for help. Rescue boats were dispatched quickly, slicing through the water towards the site of the attack. Meanwhile, a medical helicopter was also scrambled, and the critically injured friends were carefully loaded in. The whirring of the helicopter blades drowned out the sounds of the ocean below as it took off, heading for the nearest hospital. Despite the best efforts of the medical team on board, Emma and Olivia's injuries were too severe. They fought bravely, but the trauma and blood loss were insurmountable. The tragic news of their deaths spread quickly, casting a shadow over the beautiful paradise of the Maldives. An investigation into the shark attack was launched, and authorities decided to close the beach to prevent further incidents. This was the worst attack ever recorded in the Maldives, at least according to the archives. The shark that attacked the friends was a rare and aggressive species not typically found in these waters, making the incident even more shocking and devastating. The story of Emma, Olivia, and Sophia stands as a somber testament to the raw power of nature and the thin line between adventure and danger. Have you ever felt the thrill of cliff jumping? Well, after this story, you might think twice before taking that leap, especially if the waters below hide dangers lurking just beneath the surface. Our story takes us to Blue Haven, a stunning stretch of coastline in Esperance, Western Australia, known for its rugged beauty and crystal-clear waters, but also for frequent shark sightings. It was here, on a bright summer afternoon in January 2008, that the Foster siblings embarked on an adventure that would change their lives forever. Ryan Foster, 16, had always looked up to his older sisters, Ava, 21, and Chloe, 18. The siblings were close, constantly seeking out new adventures together. After spending the day on the beach around 4 p.m., they were ready for some excitement and soon found a 33-foot cliff. The quiet, isolated spot had only a few distant swimmers further out at sea. The sun glistened off the water as the trio made their way to the edge, the world falling away beneath them. Without hesitation, they jumped. The cool ocean was a refreshing break from the heat of the day. Ava and Chloe lingered near the cliffside, treading water and catching their breath, still smiling from the thrill of the leap. They stayed for a few minutes, enjoying the moment and cooling down, already talking about their next jump. Meanwhile, Ryan, still full of energy, swam a bit farther out, eager to explore the deeper water. The shimmering blue ocean seemed perfect, but beneath the surface, hidden dangers lurked. Suddenly, Ryan began splashing, struggling to stay afloat. Ava and Chloe, seeing him in the distance, thought he was playing, perhaps showing off or trying to prank them. But as his splashes became more frantic and he caught a breath to scream that there was a shark, their smiles vanished. In an instant, Ryan was pulled under and the water around him darkened with blood. Realizing the danger, Ava and Chloe sprang into action, swimming as fast as they could toward their brother. As they approached, the water erupted with violent splashes. They caught a glimpse of the distinct copper-brown body and dorsal fin of a 10-foot bronze whaler shark, thrashing before it disappeared into the depths. The shark had already delivered a severe bite to Ryan's left calf, puncturing deep into his leg. Ryan surfaced, screaming in pain, and Ava and Chloe quickly reached him, keeping him afloat as he cried out in agony. They knew they needed help fast. In the distance, they spotted jet skis, and without hesitation they waved and shouted for help, hoping their voices would be heard over the crashing waves. Further out, two young boys on jet skis noticed the frantic splashing and waving. Realizing something was terribly wrong, they sped toward the siblings. By the time the boys arrived, it became clear that a shark attack had happened. Ryan was in immediate danger from severe blood loss. Wasting no time, the boys pulled Ryan onto one of the jet skis and helped Ava and Chloe onto the other. They sped toward shore, reaching the beach in about 5 minutes, where lifeguards were stationed. Upon arrival, the lifeguards immediately sprang into action, stabilizing Ryan's wound and applying a tourniquet to his left calf to slow the bleeding. His skin was pale from blood loss, but they acted quickly, keeping him conscious until paramedics arrived. Thanks to the quick response from the boys on the jet skis and the fast action of the lifeguards, Ryan's life was saved. Though the bite from the bronze whaler shark was severe, the injury wasn't life-threatening once help arrived in time. After the attack, they swore never to enter the ocean again in these dangerous Australian waters. They had come seeking adventure, but found a terror far beyond anything they had imagined. Sometimes curiosity can lead us into unexpected danger. What begins as an ordinary day filled with adventure can swiftly turn into a nightmare. On July 17, 2019, along the stunning coastline of Maui, Hawaii, where over 100,000 surfers visit each year, Rachel Carter, a 23-year-old experienced surfer, felt the familiar pull of the ocean's rhythm. Having grown up on the California coast, Rachel was no stranger to the sea. Now, on vacation with her boyfriend, Mike Stevens, she eagerly prepared to catch some waves while Mike relaxed on the beach. Rachel paddled out with ease, losing herself in the ocean's embrace. Soon, she noticed a pod of dolphins in the distance. Her heart leaped with excitement. Without a second thought, Rachel began paddling towards them. Her curiosity piqued. The dolphins were farther out than Rachel usually ventured, but their allure was irresistible. She paddled harder, her breath quickening with excitement. Lost in the moment, she followed them further from shore, unaware of the distance she had covered, or the deepening blue beneath her. As Rachel neared the dolphins, she sensed a change. The water darkened, and the dolphins' movements grew erratic. Suddenly, she saw a flash of white and gray moving beneath her board. This was no dolphin. Before she could react, the water erupted. Her surfboard jolted violently, splintering as she was thrown into the cold shock of the ocean, swallowing her whole. As Rachel surfaced, gasping for air, she came face to face with the source of the chaos. A great white shark, nearly 15 feet long, its massive body gliding through the water with deadly intent. The remnants of Rachel's surfboard floated nearby, bitten clean in half by the shark's powerful jaws. Panic surged through her veins as she realized she was alone, far from shore, with nothing between her and the ocean's top predator. The shark circled her, its fin cutting through the water. Time seemed to slow as reality sank in. This was not a movie, not a nightmare she could wake from. This was real, and it was happening now. With terrifying speed, the shark lunged. Rachel's instincts took over. She kicked hard, aiming for the shark's snout and eyes. Its rough skin scraped against her, but she didn't stop. The shark's jaws snapped inches from her, relentless. Then, the first bite came, sending searing pain through Rachel's leg as the shark's teeth sank into her flesh. Blood clouded the water, intensifying the shark's frenzy. But Rachel refused to give up. Despite the pain and fear, she fought back, jabbing her fingers into the shark's eye. The shark recoiled, but not before its teeth grazed her arm. Trembling from blood loss and exhaustion, Rachel swam frantically toward the distant shore. Her strength was fading, and the shark circled slower now, as if weighing its options. Time was running out, and she knew it. On the shore, Mike had been watching in horror, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized what was happening. Rachel was too far out for him to reach her, and the helplessness of the situation gnawed at him. Desperate, Mike began yelling for help, waving his arms wildly, trying to attract the attention of anyone who could assist. But then, from a distance, the sound of a boat engine roared to life. A group of local boaters out on the water had noticed the commotion. They quickly rowed towards Rachel, the boat slicing through the waves with urgency. As they approached, the crew could see the struggle in the water, the shark circling its prey, the blood staining the sea. The boat reached Rachel just as the shark lunged again. One of the crew members, a burly man with years of experience on the water, leaned over the side, extending a hand towards Rachel. With the last of her strength, she reached up, her fingers grasping his as he hauled her onto the boat with a single, powerful motion. The shark, now thwarted, snapped its jaws in frustration, but the boat was already pulling away, its engine roaring as it sped back towards shore. The crew immediately began administering first aid, wrapping Rachel's wounds to stem the bleeding, while another crew member radioed for a helicopter, knowing that time was of the essence. As the boat raced back to shore, Rachel drifted in and out of consciousness, her vision blurred, her body heavy with exhaustion. But she was alive. Mike was waiting on the beach, his heart pounding as the boat approached. When he saw Rachel, pale, bloodied but alive, a wave of relief swept over him. Tears welled up as he rushed to her side, grasping her hand and whispering words of comfort, though she could barely hear them. Within minutes, a helicopter arrived and airlifted Rachel to Maui Memorial Medical Center. Rachel required emergency surgery to repair the damage to her leg and arm. The procedure was complex, but successful. It's hard to imagine how investigations can claim that humans are not on the menu for sharks when stories like Rachel's happen, yet they insist it's true. The next story takes us to the sun-drenched shores of Florida, where the serene beauty of the ocean often conceals its untamed dangers. It was a warm summer morning on July 8, 2017, when a father and son embarked on what was meant to be a day of bonding and relaxation on the open sea. But what began as a peaceful adventure soon turned into a harrowing fight for survival. Mark Langford, a seasoned sailor and devoted father, had been planning this trip for months. His son, Ethan, a 16-year-old with a deep love for the ocean, was thrilled. The two had always shared a bond over the sea, and this trip was intended to strengthen that connection. As the first rays of sunlight kissed the horizon, they set sail from a small marina on Florida's eastern coast, excitement hanging in the air. The ocean was calm that morning, its surface reflecting the golden hues of the rising sun. After a few hours of sailing, they reached a secluded bay, far from the bustling beaches and crowded tourist spots. It was the perfect place to anchor and take a break. The heat was already intensifying, and the crystal-clear water below looked incredibly inviting. Ethan, unable to resist the call of the sea, asked his father if he could take a quick dip. Mark, always cautious but confident in the safety of the area, agreed. As Ethan dove into the water, he cut through the surface with a splash and emerged with a grin, the cool water providing immediate relief from the summer heat. For a few blissful moments, everything was perfect. The world seemed to stand still as Ethan swam near the boat, enjoying the freedom and serenity of the open water. Mark watched his son, a smile of contentment on his face, unaware of the dark shadow moving beneath the waves. Then, without warning, Ethan felt something brush against his leg. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible touch, but enough to make him pause. He glanced around, his heart beginning to race, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Brushing it off as his imagination, he continued to swim, unaware of the danger closing in on him. Suddenly, the water around him erupted in a frenzy of movement. Ethan felt a sharp, searing pain in his calf as a massive tiger shark clamped onto his leg. The force of the bite was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a pain so intense it stole the breath from his lungs. He tried to scream, but the shock rendered him silent. All he could do was thrash wildly, his body instinctively fighting to break free. Mark, still on the boat, heard the splashing and looked up, his heart dropping as he saw his son struggling in the water. Without a second thought, he dove in, his only thought to save his boy. He swam furiously toward Ethan. Mark grabbed Ethan, trying to pry him free from the shark's relentless grip. But the predator was too powerful. The water was thick with blood, and every second felt like an eternity. Mark fought with everything he had, but it wasn't enough. The shark, undeterred by Mark's attempts, turned its attention to him, delivering a brutal bite to his arm. The pain was immediate and excruciating. Mark felt himself being pulled under, his strength fading as the shark's jaws tightened around his arm. For a moment, it seemed all hope was lost, both father and son trapped in the terrifying grip of the ocean's apex predator. But fate had other plans. Just when it seemed the end was near, help arrived. A nearby yacht, anchored a short distance away, had a seasoned skipper on board, a retired Navy diver named Tom Mitchell. Tom had spent years navigating the world's most dangerous waters, but nothing could have prepared him for the scene he witnessed that day. Without hesitation, he grabbed his spear gun and dove into the water, his mind focused solely on saving the Langfords. Tom moved swiftly, his experience and training guiding his every move. He reached Mark and Ethan just as the shark was preparing to drag them further into the depths. With precision honed from years of diving, Tom fired the spear gun, striking the shark just behind its gills. The predator recoiled, momentarily stunned, and released its grip on both Mark and Ethan. Tom quickly grabbed them both, pulling them toward the surface with a strength that belied his age. By the time they reached the boat, both Mark and Ethan were barely conscious, their bodies marked by the brutal attack. Tom didn't waste a second. He pulled them aboard and immediately began administering first aid, his hands moving with the calm efficiency of someone who had been in life-or-death situations before. With the bleeding somewhat under control, Tom radioed for help, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. The minutes that followed felt like hours, but finally, the sound of a helicopter approaching broke the tension. The rescue team airlifted Mark and Ethan to Flagler Hospital in St. Augustine, where they were rushed into surgery. The shark's bites had caused severe damage, and the blood loss had taken a toll on their bodies. For days, Mark and Ethan lay in the hospital, but with each passing day, they slowly regained strength, their bodies fighting to heal. When they finally awoke, groggy but alive, there was an overwhelming sense of relief. They had survived. The odds had been stacked against them, yet they had made it through, thanks in no small part to Tom Mitchell's heroic actions. Thanks for tuning in to the most gruesome shark attacks on humans. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. We've got plenty more thrilling shark stories coming your way. Don't forget to hit the like button before you go, and we'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe out there.